Founders, this show is for you. We're diving into the stuff that actually keeps you up at night. Cash flow, lead gen, the hiring maze, just to name a few. Every episode is one challenge, one guest, and a whole lot of practical advice you can implement immediately. My mission is your success, so send over your questions and let's get to work. Hi everyone, welcome. I'm excited to launch into today's show. I have Jeff as my guest, and I invited Jeff because he has extensive lived experience when it comes to helping growing businesses get unstuck. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Be here. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Okay, Jeff, let's dive in. First topic I want to touch on is cash flow. And I know that this keeps most business owners up at night. What advice do you have for someone that is growing their business and struggling with maintaining consistent cash flow?
Yeah, cash flow is often one of the things that's easy to get caught flat-footed on. You get into business, you're like, oh, I just need a few more sales and then everything will be fine. I'll have all this cash in my bank account. It'll be great.
Yeah.
And the thing I learned personally is there's nothing that'll eat cash faster than a fast-growing business, because especially in businesses that involve a lot of inventory or a lot of stock, it can really, when you need more stock because you're selling more stuff, and all of a sudden you need an extra $100,000 or $200,000 sitting in the back room, and that money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It came out of your profits to have more inventory and more assets. And I think one of the things that I often help business owners that are struggling with that in a growth phase is understanding a cash flow statement. Because when you first get into business, especially if you haven't gone through business school, a cash flow statement is this mystical report that you run but never actually read initially. And then you start to realize that really that's where a lot of the missing pieces of information are in terms of understanding how the money went from your bank account to somewhere else in your business. And a lot of people are surprised to realize it's actually sitting in the back room. And that was when I scaled out my business. That was something that almost caught us flat-footed and almost put us under. Was we were growing at 35% a year in sales. And I'm like, oh, we're selling stuff. It's all good. Just keep growing. Don't worry about it. And we started to run out of cash. And I was like, how can we sell more stuff and run out of money? I don't get this. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And I really got into the numbers. I sat down like, okay, I need to figure this out. And that was what it was. We doubled the amount of inventory we had on hand. And it ate $150,000 in cash just magically out the back door. And well, it wasn't out the back door. It was still in the back room. But once I understood that relation, how do you manage that better is you have to be realistic in how fast can I grow? We spend the first part of our businesses thinking about, okay, how do I stay in business? How do I get the next sale? How do I stop from going broke? And it's easy to get stuck in that mindset. And then you really have to start thinking about, okay, how much cash can I reinvest in the business to fuel its growth? Like everybody wants to see 50% year over year growth. Wouldn't that be wonderful? 50 or 100%, double the business every year. But when you start looking about, okay, how much cash do I have to reinvest in order to fuel that growth? How many more staff am I going to need? How much more inventory? And looking at that piece of carrying that thing is you might not be able to grow as fast as you want unless you're willing to start, like if you want to bootstrap everything, you don't want to take on a bunch of loans. You've got to measure how much of the profits you're willing to reinvest. And often in the early years, you're just trying to make enough money to pay your own bills. And then looking at putting more in can be, kind of a chicken and egg scenario. And that's when you have to start considering lending. How much do you want to lend or borrow? And how much do you want to bootstrap? And then being realistic with that when you build out your plans for growth. Because a lot of people, sorry, I just keep going on and on.
Yeah, keep going, Jeff. This is fascinating.
A lot of people talk about how businesses fail in the first 5 years. Because, it's a struggle. And I mean, every entrepreneur is been through the fire, and it's a character building experience. But not as many conversations go on about how many businesses blow themselves up in the following 5 years, growing too fast. Like they grow extremely rapidly, they run out of cash, they get into trouble, they make some bad decisions, and that's the end. Not because they didn't have a good market opportunity, but because they were unrealistic with how fast they could sustainably grow with keeping the operation intact as well as funding that growth. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what about service-based businesses? I mean, I know you said with, product-based businesses, you have to pay for inventory, but service-based businesses tend to have less overhead.
Yeah.
What advice do you give them?
Service-based businesses are different, but it still takes money to fund their growth. Because whenever you hire somebody new, you have to pay them for like 3 months before they actually start generating revenue, or you start seeing the impact in your business. So how many people can you afford to hire and wait to see on sustainably in the business, right? I mean, when you're providing services, people are your inventory. Capacity is your inventory. And until it's fully deployed, it doesn't make you money, right? And that's a way, when you look at hiring new staff, I think that's always something that I've learned to do and suggest other people do is, okay, if I'm going to hire this person, how long would it take me to get my money back? What's my ROI on this person, assuming everything goes well? And what is it if it doesn't go well? What if I have to, try this 2 or 3 times before I get the right person in the role? And you have to know that it doesn't always work out perfectly. Anybody that's ever hired staff knows that sometimes, especially for a new position, it can take a few attempts before you find the right fit. And often, especially when you hire your first few employees, you can feel this pressure to be like, I just need some help. I'm so busy. I just need some help. I'm just going to hire somebody. So you hire them and they're like, okay, I'm here. What do you want me to do? And if you haven't set aside the time to figure out what you want that person doing that's going to make them productive and get that ROI for you, you're going to waste 3 months of salary that's got to come out of your pocket while you spend the time figuring out how to make that person productive in your business. Yeah. And that's that investment piece of like that cash is still an outlay until that person is able to return that value to the business. You've still got to plan for that as the business grows for each position that you add on. And I see how so it's still similar in a service-based business, but obviously different than having pallets of stuff sitting in the back room.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of hiring, how do you know, how do you hire the right person? Because I've spoken to several business owners and I've experienced this myself. You hire someone because you believe that they're the right fit for the role, but then you may learn that they're not after you've hired them. So is there a magic formula, or is it just trial and error?
Well, I'm not going to tell you there's not some trial and error. I think there's lots of things you can do to improve your chances of getting the right person. One is being role clarity. Like before you go out to the market and try to buy something, which like try to find an employee to fill a position, getting really clear on what the actual job duties are going to be for that person, and not being like, other duties as described. Like, we've all had one of those jobs where we got hired with this description and then everything we did was in other duties as described. Because it's a two-way street. Like if you're not clear with the person you're hiring about what their job is actually going to be like, then you're going to have a lot higher turnover, right? Like you got to think about it from their perspective. Is like, do I want to do this type of work? Like the old bait and switch of this job sounds great, and then we're going to have you do this work over here. I think that's probably the first piece. The second piece is hire for personality, train for skill. There seems to be, I think it's changing now, but for the last decade and a half, it was all, you must show up with all of these skills at the door, ready to go. And I think my favorite example of how unrealistic some of that had become, where employers just weren't willing to train. I can't remember what the programming language was, but it required the position listed required 5 years of experience. And the guy that invented the programming language just commented on the post, well, I invented this and I only have 3 years of experience, so I'm not sure who's going to be applying for this job.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. But with a small business though, like, especially a business that's growing quickly,
Yeah.
they may not know what kind of help they need. They might need somebody that is a Jack or Jill of all trades that can help them, when things get hectic. How do you navigate that?
Well, I think that's part of the thing is you have to make time to think about, like, it's not, I just need help. You have to make time to determine what kind of help. And and that can be, I need somebody that has a broad skill set or is adaptable. But that
Mhm.
also may mean, again, hiring for personality and then developing that person for skill,
Mhm.
versus expecting them to show up fully trained at everything you might need them for, and
Yeah.
then pay them at a much lower rate because that's what you can afford,
Yeah.
right? So you have to be, and that was in my own business, which, just a little background, it was a diversified tourism and convenience store, as well as several other types of businesses on top of it. Um, we found that you start out like, minimum wage, we'll get minimum wage employees. This is great. And then you realize that minimum wage means minimum effort.
Yeah.
And we found, and I suffered over and over, as many people have, in constant staff turnover. Like, okay, we'd get somebody, we'd get them trained. It would be 3 months in, and then they'd get a different job. And then I'd be back on the floor doing this on again.
Mm.
And I started to realize the cost to me, it was more costly to me to constantly having to fill roles for employee turnover than just to pay people more, like
Mm.
pay them what they were worth. It was cheaper. It was cheaper to pay employees more than it was to have constant turnover and have, so we actually paid nearer the top end of the range for retail employees. But it means I had the same from that point forward. I think our employee turnover was like minimal. And you have to be realistic.
Mm.
Like, you can't pay a crazy amount, like outside the box, for any given job range. But we found that instead of spending money on training, we just spent that money on employees, and they were great, and they were helpful, and they were engaged in their jobs, and they weren't really having the wandering eye because it was really hard to find an equal position. We treated them well. And that allowed me to get out of the business and then start building the business, because I didn't have to constantly look over my shoulder about, who's going to quit tomorrow and what
Mhm.
job am I going to end up doing. And that made a huge difference. Really, that was one of the turning points of our business. Has allowed us to scale, was taking a different approach to bringing team members on, and really thinking about, and we actually wouldn't hire people if we couldn't figure out why it was a good fit for them as well.
Mm.
Like,
Oh, fantastic.
why would you want to stay in this job for a year? And if it's like,
Mhm.
well, clearly you're just looking for something to pay you until you can move on to the next thing. Well, it was just too costly for us to hire them. If we couldn't figure out why they wanted to work for us,
Mhm.
we wouldn't hire them regardless of what skills they had.
Yeah, yeah. I spoke to a chiropractor recently, and she's been in business for 25 years. And I was talking to her about hiring, and she said, she really did learn the hard way. And when I asked her, what insights she's gleaned, she said to me, in the interview, if the candidate is speaking more about themselves
Mhm.
than asking questions about your business, that's usually a flag for her. And I thought, isn't that fascinating? I never thought of it that way. But it seems to work for her, and now she has a pretty good hiring track record. It
Mhm.
took her many years, so and many dollars to get there, but she did finally get there. And I
Yeah.
think for myself, like, what I'm looking for is someone who's curious and someone who can learn on their own,
Yeah.
because I don't have time to teach anyone. Can they go out and do the research and come back and apply what they've learned with minimal supervision?
Mhm. Yeah. And it's great when you can get creative people on your team that are willing to take some responsibility. Uh,
Mhm.
but I think it's also a two-way conversation. One of the questions we always used to ask was, how do you like to be managed? What do you need?
I love that.
What do you need from me in order to feel good at your job?
Yeah.
And I was never a micromanager, so anybody was like, well, I like a whole bunch of direction, very specific direction. They may have been a great employee for somebody, but probably not for me, because I really gave my people a lot of freedom in terms of allowing them to approach problems in different ways and solve problems on their own, and then just consult with me after. And that was, so we pre-screened for that. I spent a lot of time on our hiring process, like what questions do we ask, and what are we actually trying to get out of the questions on the interview process? Because a lot of people just use the form. They download the form from the internet. What questions should I ask during an interview? And then you just go down the list and you don't really care about the answers. We put a lot of time into what questions should we ask, because what are the things that will make this person a good addition to the team? And our last question was always kind of a random one, but it was, if you were going on vacation, and you knew you were going to be stuck on this desert island or beach island for 6 months, what would you take with you? We really didn't care about the responses. It was how they thought about the world. Like, oh, well, I better take some water and I'm going to need some tools. This is like a practical application tool. Well, I may bring some friends, and I'd want this, and this. And that was a very telling question about how they viewed themselves in relation to the world and what they would be like to work with. And it's not something they could have prepared beforehand for the interview. And that we actually found that we got more out of that question than any of the skills-based questions that we asked as part of the interview process.
That's a very, very fascinating tip. I'm going to steal that one.
By all means.
Okay, so Jeff, when it comes to like things that stop businesses from growing, like hurdles that business owners experience, what do you think is the biggest hurdle that comes, that interferes with the business's growth?
The biggest one, especially in early stage businesses, is commitment to absolute perfection. Which, when we get into business, it's often because we're technical experts and we're good at something, really good at something. And that's why other people want to pay us to do it. And then we get busy, so we need a little bit of help. And we are obsessive about creating processes, or about making sure that every single customer gets the exact same experience. And that often takes the form of, I have to do it myself. And the thing that is something that every business owner will tell you that's scaled to any kind of size is that you have to accept that if anybody could do it as well as you could, they would own the business. And in order to scale out, you have to decide what is the 80% of stuff that is actually important and must happen in the business, and what is the stuff 20% that can be maybe done in a slightly different way. And maybe you would do it in one way, but it's acceptable if done another way. And one of my favorite phrasings for how to put this is out of Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time, which is a great book if anybody hasn't read it. And he says 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome. And I think that's a good lesson to live by, because part of scaling a business is trusting other people to do things on your behalf. Take the things that you're good at and build a system that can deliver that almost to the same level that you could do it if you were standing there yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people struggle with, including myself initially, was, okay, I'm a perfectionist. Like I will own that I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. And I used to be super obsessive about how customer interactions went and how every piece of the business worked. And I had to learn that in order to scale, I couldn't be the chief maintainer of every single interaction point with a customer. I had to build processes that would guide people to delivering that same service, and then make my work focused on fixing the process, not babysitting the actual delivery. And if I didn't like how something was done, then I had to figure out how to modify the training or the process to make it closer to what I wanted it to be, versus stand there and watch somebody do it.
Yeah. It's almost foolproof.
Yeah. And like we used to have a lot of that kind of conversations. And I bet you it took me, the restaurant portion of our business, I bet it took 8 iterations of the processes, like the how do you manufacture food, to keep it consistent until we were happy with, like, yes, we're getting a consistent product over and over again. But had I taken the approach of standing there and doing it myself, or making sure that I was literally monitoring everything that came through, we wouldn't have been able to scale that part of our operation, because I didn't have time to focus anywhere else. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is being willing to delegate and then make it an ongoing iterative improvement program, instead of having it have to be perfect before you're willing to trust somebody else in your organization to do it on your behalf.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we know that's what causes businesses to get stuck in a way. What about what causes businesses to just flat out fail?
I think losing track of what's important in terms of getting obsessed over one particular part of the business, and then not paying attention to things like cash flow, for example, and burnout. Often, one of the things that will put a business under is pushing yourself to the point where you are just so burnt out you can't solve problems anymore. I mean, one of the things that everybody who's ever owned a business knows is that you're often having a continual stream of problems thrown at your head, problems nobody else wants. And if you don't build a system to support you, and you want to be the hero of every situation, you will burn out. You will get angry. You'll be mean to your customers, and and then you won't have any customers anymore. And that, I think, that is probably one of the biggest things that puts people under, is it eventually breaks the spirit of anybody who's not been willing to build a system where they can trust others to help them, and they just eventually give up, because that's what kills a business. Anything, if the entrepreneur's still got some fight left in them, most of the time they can find a way. There's one thing I know about entrepreneurs: they're smart, they're hardworking, and we will find a way to make it work, right up into the point where you just don't have any gas left in the tank. And that's, I think, the point at which businesses, close up shop or get sold for parts. Or
Yeah. And I think at that point, your body just stops cooperating. Like you may want to push yourself, but your body's like, nope, we're done playing this game. We're done.
Yeah. That entrepreneurial burnout is such a hard thing, because most people who start companies are high performers. They are hardwired to work hard. And it's not for lack of effort that doesn't make the company go forward. It's often wanting to be the best. And sometimes that means for me, I used to have a hero complex. I liked the idea that when there was a problem, I was the one that solved it. So I would, we used to have a problem with our, one of our computer systems that would constantly reoccur. And I would get the phone call no matter what I was doing. I'd have to come back into the office and I would fix the problem. And everybody would be like, "Oh, Jeff, that's such a great job. We couldn't have done this without you." And then after about the third time, I thought, why, I have to fix this problem over and over again. Why am I doing this? I like the feeling of somebody saying to me, "Oh, good job, Jeff. We couldn't have done it without you." And what I learned was, in order for me to grow the business, I had to stop being the solution machine for every problem. So then every time I had a problem like that, I would solve it and then think about, why did this occur? And how can I make it somebody else's problem the next time it happens? So, for that example, I wrote a process manual that said, if this occurs, here's the steps to try and fix it. Once you've been through these, then phone me. And then inevitably it happened again. The first thing the staff did is read the manual, right? No. Manual, they phoned me. They phoned me and said, "Hey, Jeff, we need you to come fix this." I'm like, "Sorry, guys. Tell you what, I actually wrote a process to fix this. Why don't you go read the manual?
Yeah.
And then call me back if it doesn't work." And so they went and read the manual, and then they fixed the problem, and that was the end of it. And then 2 weeks later, same problem occurs, and my phone rings, and they're like, "Hey, this has happened again." I'm like, "Did you read the manual?" "Oh, right." And then after The third time, it takes a while when you've been the solution machine to
Yeah.
train your team not to use you as the easy button.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just it. It's training yourself out of your job, really, so
Yeah.
you can get out of being in the day to day.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And you have to have a certain degree of self-awareness too, I think, as an entrepreneur, to
Yeah.
know when you're getting in your own way
Yeah.
and when you need to get out of your own way.
Yeah. I think that's 100% right. One of the examples I always like to use is building a business is like painting a big mural on the side of a wall, right? Where you've got the paintbrush and your palette of pictures and you're right up against the wall drawing a nice little picture in there. And it's really hard to keep your eye on the whole thing. And sometimes you need some help having somebody grab you by the shoulders and back up and say,
Yeah.
here's the thing you're making. Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about all these other pieces. Because it's really hard to do when you're in the details of your business, and can be really frustrating if, the wall's not quite smooth and you're just trying to make a certain piece that particular way. But having that perspective and having a mentor that you can connect with can make a big difference in allowing you to see the big picture of your business, and take time to step back and make a plan, like a strategic plan, versus always get fixated on the tiny little details of the day-to-day of your business.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you say to someone who's thinking about quitting? They're like, this is not what I signed up for. This is way too much stress. I don't know if I have it in me.
Isn't that the conversation most entrepreneurs have with themselves before they've had coffee in the morning?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is getting clear on what it is that you want out of this. Like, why do you want to build a business? Is it about lifestyle for yourself? Is it about wanting to create something? Like, being clear on first why you want to do it, and then being clear with what the end goal looks like, and deciding whether or not what you would have to do to get to that goal is worth it, right? If it's worth it to get to where you want to go, then you start breaking it down into smaller pieces. Okay, what do I need to have done by the end of the year to get there? What do I need to have done at the end of 6 months? What do I have to get done at the end of 3 months? What do I have to get done tomorrow? And then it doesn't seem like climbing such a big mountain. If you're clear on your purpose, on your why, it's a lot easier to stomach the day-to-day of what you have to do and the stuff you have to put up with. And my favorite question, to make it slightly less painful, is what would this business look like if it was easy? Like, if my business was easy to run, what would it look like? And then just try to do those things. Right?
Yeah.
Don't do the things that make your life painful. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to have to go to 1 million networking events, for example. Okay, well, what would that look like if I didn't have to do that? Okay, well, I'd have to create some kind of lead generation funnel that would help direct customers to my business and start the process so that I don't have to go do personal sales for everything. Okay, so what would it take to build that? And you can start to change your mindset about, instead of focusing on how much this isn't fun, change your framing around, what if this business was fun to run? What would that look like? How would my business work? And it's a much more positive experience and can be a little refreshing versus I'm not having any fun. This is super hard, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you can come up with a lot better ideas when you ask yourself that question, how can we make this fun? Or if it was fun, what would it look like? Versus, I hate this.
Yeah.
I'm burnt out. I don't want to do this anymore. What did I sign up for?
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. Okay. Now, talking about, I think this is a good segue. Let's talk about strategic plans, right? People come up with these plans. Everyone says you need to have a plan. What's your take on that?
Oh, strategic plans, one of my favorite buzzwords. Strategic plans are important. Knowing where you're going is important. Having a plan to get there is important. But if you spend one weekend building in a masterful strategic plan and you get it all organized and you got different sections, and then you use that plan to fix the wobbly leg on your desk and never look at it again, that's not a good use of strategic planning. I think one of the biggest things about strategic planning is it's easy to download templates off the internet, and some of them are pretty thick in terms of, oh, you need 60 pages of whatever it is. The biggest thing is it has to be usable. A strategic plan is useless unless it actually is something you can use on a regular basis to guide your business, to guide the decisions you and your team make. Because when you put forth a strategic plan, when you have a team to manage, you're basically saying to them this is how I'm thinking about the business and where I want to go. Use this to make your decisions on my behalf to guide the business. It's a document that helps take decisions off your desk. And that's not often what a strategic plan is used for. It's used as a exercise to plan because we know we're supposed to plan.
Yeah.
And then we forget all about it until next year. And then we're like, oh yeah, we didn't do any of the things that were in the strategic plan. or we actually got, we happened to accomplish 10 of these, but we was not because that was the plan. I think when it comes to strategic plan, especially for small business, if it's too long for you to read it, like at least every couple of weeks, it's too long.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's a page, your strategic plan can be a page. It's being clear on, okay, what are the things that are going to move the business forward? And there's all different kinds of systems and ideas. Like Attraction's a pretty popular one, the entrepreneurial operating system. And there's a lot of good things about that. It's actually drawn from a series of other books. But one of the things it's best at is it makes clear on what your team should be focusing on. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty simple, like one-page reports. It says, okay, if senior management wants these 5 things to change, each sub-level breaks down what would have to happen at their level in order to accomplish the next bigger goal. And that just escalates down the organization. And that's a really good way to keep the team aligned, because when you think about strategic planning, then they can look at it and go, hey, what should I buy this or not? Is this a good investment or not? Well, the strategic plan says that we need to, increase our production by X percentage. The best way to do that is to buy this new piece of manufacturing equipment, or we need to lower our cost of this. It might be to buy a new server or whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. You can actually have something to make decisions against, because if it's not going to serve one of the main 5 goals of the company or the goal that you've been tasked with, well, that's like, why are you doing it? It's not actually moving forward that piece of the business. And that's, I think, the most important part of a strategic plan, to bring it back around, is to enable both yourself and your team a framework that you've fully thought through of what's going to move the business forward, to be able to make decisions based off of it. Because if you're not using your strategic plan to make business decisions, really it's just a make work project. And I wouldn't recommend anybody just do a plan that they aren't going to use, because what's the point of that?
Yeah. And I imagine it would also keep you away from pursuing shiny objects too.
Yeah, I love a good shiny object. I'm right there with the rest of my fellow entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs live in a world of possibility, right?
Yeah.
And
there we go. You're back.
I'm back. Sorry. We all see shiny objects, like whether it's, a new type of business add-on we could do. And having a good strategic plan allows you to filter a lot of those shiny rocks, decide which ones are gold and which ones should be thrown back into the river or set aside for another day.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things I had to learn personally was, just because it's a good idea doesn't mean it's a good idea right now. Every good idea I would find, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. We got to do that. Oh, that's another great idea. We got to do that. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. And I felt like if I didn't accept it, it wasn't a good idea. And then I had to reevaluate, well, do I know what a good idea is? But really, lots of things can be good ideas in your business, but you can only have so many things you can move forward. One of the analogies I like is if you have 10 cars that are out of gas and you're in a race, you got to push them over the finish line. So you can run to each car, and you can push it ahead a little bit, push the next one ahead a little bit, or you can push one car all the way over the finish line. Which one would you rather have? Would you like to finish the race by getting something over the finish line and then going back for another car? Or do you want to just move a bunch of little goals ahead slightly without ever actually getting anything over the finish line? Mm-hmm. And that changed my thinking about, even if all the ideas are equal, they're all good, you can't implement them all. And using a strategic plan to filter which are the best good ideas that you should work on right now and which ones you set aside for another day was a big change for me. And that was something that I had to learn as well.
Yeah, I bet. I'd rather just push one car.
Yeah.
Well, I want to win the race.
Yeah.
Now, somebody had once said this, stop making decisions and start building the conditions.
Oh, I think it's just me now. I'm stuck. Ria's dropped off. Oh, there you're back.
Surprise. You got to love doing lives. So someone had said, stop making decisions and start building the conditions under which good decisions happen reliably. So creating good conditions where you can make good decisions.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. How can we create good conditions in a business?
I really like that. It's a good alliteration, but I think the first thing for setting good conditions in a business is making it clear where you're trying to go. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to get lost in a business if you don't understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. Don't understand who your customer is, who your client is. And I mean, not in a general sense, but like what is the value you provide, and having a really good foundational set for where you're trying to go and why. And I think that's probably the most important part in setting the stage in a business, is that clarity. And in addition to clarity, it's building an environment of trust in your business, because trust is the fuel that businesses run on. And if you don't build a culture where your team can have honest discussions about what needs to change or what they think needs to happen in order to accomplish those goals that have already been laid out, it's really hard to get anything done, because everybody spends a lot of time trying not to start fights or want to be friends with everyone. Mm-hmm. You haven't developed a culture of trust where you help promote that active discussion, and that people are comfortable enough with each other that one, conversation with a little bit of friction is going to cause this big emotional blow up. I think that's one of the most important things in building out a company, is creating that trusting culture where real conversations can happen and figure out together what the next step is going to be. I think that's the most important base coat, I guess, of setting the conditions for success. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, the insights you've shared are fantastic. I'm going to go back and rewatch this episode because I feel like I need to take notes and apply some of the strategies you shared. Before we dive into Q&A, when should a business consider hiring someone like yourself?
I think really it's always good to bring people into the business when you're struggling to solve a problem, or if you're looking to implement a change. Often reaching out to somebody like me, a business consultant, fractional, there's all kinds of fractional options out there these days. It's one, reaching out is usually free. Like, you can always consult professionals and say, well, what do you think about this? And a good business coach or leadership development person will give you a pretty clear answer of, okay, well, I think here's where your challenges are, and here's what it would take to solve those. And sometimes I have a lot of coffees. I meet with a lot of people and I talk a lot of business problems. And sometimes, honestly, here's a book. You need to read this book.
Yeah.
This will solve your problem. And that's obviously free advice. And you should take as much of that as you can get or want. But it's really when you've reached the edge of your capacity, don't suffer. Start looking around for what are my options to address this that doesn't just involve me working harder. Like, I hate managing the financial side of my business. Okay. If you don't like that, what are your options to solve that? Is it a bookkeeper? Is it looking to bring in a fractional CFO that's helping your numbers? Is it, I want to grow the business, but I'm really struggling with my team? Okay, well, maybe working with a leadership development person like me, your business coach, might help you with the processes and thought process of helping scale the team. And I think for a lot of smaller businesses, it can be really intimidating to, like, I don't need another expense on my payroll, right? And I get that. I totally get that. And I think it's, so then they don't explore it all, right? They don't say, okay, well, like, what does that look like? And one of the things that I've learned working with bigger businesses is they'll scope anything out. They'll be like, oh yeah, how much do you want? Oh yeah, you want X amount of money? Okay, well, show us how it makes us money. And I think if somebody can convince you that, and you believe, not being sold, but you believe that you're going to come out better for it than you are right now, I think it's worth looking at, right? Like, being willing to explore and ask questions. And my favorite thing is be willing to not be the smartest person in the room and see what help is out there. I've asked a lot of dumb questions in my life, and I'm the better for it because a lot of people have helped me in my businesses understand things that I would not have learned had I not been willing to ask questions. And I think that's, to answer your question more directly, is if you think you need a specific kind of help, just ask, like, okay, what can you do for me in this area? And if you're like, yeah, that's not what I need, then, it's 15 minutes of your life and move on. If it is, you're like, actually, that would be really helpful. What does that look like? Like, what's my investment? How's the payoff? What are the risks? Start like treating everything as a, what's the risk? What's the cost benefit analysis? And then you can find the help that you need to move your business forward. Does that answer your question? Or
It does. And I love asking, what's the risk? Because that's a question I haven't thought of asking from a service provider, but I'm sure it would have probably saved me from a lot of grief and headaches had I asked that question. What's the risk? Because if I'm willing to tolerate the risk, then I can hire them. But if I'm not, then there's my answer.
Yeah. And that's, as with anything, any business decision is, being part of being an entrepreneur is taking risks, but also covering your downside. Like, okay, how am I going to tell if this is working? If it's not working, how do I get out of this? And what is my exposure? And if it's something you can live with, then maybe it's worth taking a risk. If it's something you're like, no, that would be a fatal thing, we can't do that, then you should be pretty clear on your parameters of, I can't take that risk. Even if it's a good idea, I can't take that risk. And that's a decision that you have to make. But never be scared to reach out to like other entrepreneurs. And there is a pretty healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is one of the things I really love, is being able to connect with other entrepreneurs, service providers, and just, see what's out there and get a little peer support. It's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. This conversation is fantastic. And I can't wait to have you back on again. And maybe we can dive into another layer of helping a business out. Al, do we have any questions from any of the viewers? And if you're watching, just to let you know, I can't see the questions. I can't see your questions. So somebody has to share them with me.
It doesn't look like there's any, I don't think, in the...
Yeah, we don't have any questions currently, but
Okay.
I thought there was a lot of valuable information in there, and excited to listen to it again after.
Yeah, me too. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate your time and your wisdom. I'm sure everyone's going to benefit from this when they rewatch it later on, or watch the recording. And yeah, if any questions come in, just share them in the on LinkedIn chat, and then we'll get back to you.
Awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share some of the things I've learned over my experience. And I honestly wish the best for every entrepreneur. I mean, building a business is an act of creation, and I think makes the world a bit of a better place. So thank you for all of the work that everybody does building up businesses.
Yes. And it looks like we do have a question.
Okay.
What's a growing pain you experienced that made you question whether you should continue, and what helped you push through it?
Oh, there were so many times. I think one of the biggest challenges we faced early on was having to do both run the business and work in the business. When I earlier in my career, I didn't quite understand what I should be looking for when I bought a business, and we basically overpaid for our business, which trapped us on the front line. I went from a pretty senior level position to, working the till in my own business, which is not really what I signed up for when I bought a business. And that was extremely frustrating because I knew that I needed to work on the business. And I couldn't get to it because I was constantly dealing with service delivery. And that was very frustrating. And I almost sold the business a couple of times during that phase. Honestly, what helped me get through it was I was kind of trapped between a rock and a hard place. It was, do or die. And I started to think about, okay, like, why did I get into this? What was I trying to accomplish? And like what we talked about earlier was my wife and I recently got married. We wanted to build a life together. And I started to focus on the positives. And actually, right around that time, I listened to Atomic Habits, which if anybody hasn't listened to it. It's about basically 1% improvements. Like, stop trying to fix everything all at once. And I adopted that as a philosophy of, okay, what's something I can make 1% better? And that's where my kind of mantra of, okay, every time I have a problem, I'm not just going to fix it. I'm going to put it in a process manual so that somebody else can fix it. And that was, literally one problem at a time. I clawed my way out of operational responsibility. And that allowed me to free up some of my time. Obviously, we also had to generate more cash so that I could afford to pay more staff. And it was kind of this multiplying effect of, as I started to fix little things in the business that gave me just a little bit more time, I reinvested that in fixing more things that made customers happier. I remember, and it was stupid things, like the things that you think shouldn't matter in a business. I remember there was it wasn't a burnt out light, which actually just wasn't a light over one section of our store, and it made kind of one part of the store shadowy. So I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get a light put in there. So I put in a light. I think it cost me $300 with the electrician or something like that. And it increased sales in that chunk of the store by like 18%. And I was like, I wonder how much some more lighting would fix some of the other things. So then we spent some money on upgrading a lot of the other lights. And it's stupid. It was just fixing lights, but it actually gave us a boost in sales. And then we started, taking some of that and reinvesting it in other things. And over the time I owned that business, we more than tripled our revenue, and doing the right things consistently and building systems versus one-off fixes. Like, every time something needed to change, we leaned towards building a system to fix it versus just trying to fix it with each individual. Right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love that approach of building systems instead of one-time fixes, because you don't want to be going back and fixing that problem over and over again. Just like you built a manual for your staff so that they don't keep calling you.
Yeah, 100%. It's just like some of the work that you guys do. You don't build a program. Imagine if you had to code every line every time. Like, that would be a hard way to use a program versus, build a structure to make something happen repeatably and consistently. And that's, I think that logic also applies to a business. Is if you think about it as you're building a machine to do what you're good at, that helps a lot with making life a little bit easier. So I hope that answered the question for that person.
I'm sure it did. Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. Well, we are almost out of time. Al, if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll wrap up.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.
Building an app or need integrations or automation? Access the government funding, get the features that drive early revenue, and avoid the pitfalls other agencies won't tell you about. Contact us at newideamachine.com.